in my search to understand how so many adults in the cult I was raised in came to justify and participate in horrific acts against children, I've been exploring the complex landscape of psychosis. One particular facet that continues to resonate with me is shared psychosis, a phenomenon that may offer insight into how delusion, when nurtured within a group dynamic, can spread like wildfire, consuming individual morality in the name of collective belief. In the landscape of psychological phenomena, few are as hauntingly surreal as shared psychosis, a rare but deeply revealing condition that speaks to the power of belief, suggestion, and emotional entanglement. Officially known in psychiatric terms as folie à deux, or madness of two, shared psychosis is a disorder in which delusional beliefs are transmitted from one individual to another. It is not just a clinical curiosity, it is a mirror reflecting society's vulnerabilities, the fragility of perception, and the quiet, sometimes dangerous, human longing to belong. Shared psychosis, classified under the DSM-5 as a subtype of delusional disorder, when two or more people share the same delusion, occurs when a person who already has a firmly held delusional belief, known as the primary or inducer, transfers that belief to one or more close associates. These others, often emotionally or physically dependent on the primary individual, begin to adopt the same distorted beliefs, even when the content is irrational, implausible, or clearly false. Historically, the phenomenon was first described in the 19th century by French psychiatrists Ernest Charles Lassague and Jules Falret, who coined the term folie à deux after observing cases in which delusions appeared to be contagious among closely bonded individuals. Since then, further subtypes have been identified, such as folie à trois, shared by three people, folie en famille, within an entire family, and folie à plusieurs, involving groups, though all operate under similar psychological dynamics. Real-world cases often sound like plots pulled from psychological thrillers, but they are chillingly real. Slender Man, 2014 in Waukesha, Wisconsin, two 12-year-old girls lured their classmate into the woods and stabbed her 19 times, claiming they did so to appease Slender Man, a fictional internet character they believed to be real. Immersed in an online world of creepypasta horror fiction, the girls reinforced each other's delusions, building a shared narrative so convincing that it overpowered their grasp on reality. Though the primary diagnosis included early-onset schizophrenia for one of the girls, the dynamic between them bore the clear imprint of folie à deux, a tragic example of how shared belief, isolation, and psychological vulnerability can culminate in real-world violence. The Erickson twins. In 2008, identical twins Ursula and Sabina Erickson captured headlines when they ran into traffic on a British motorway, convinced they were being pursued. Despite suffering injuries, they continued to exhibit bizarre behavior, including escaping from police custody and one twin later stabbing a man to death. Both women were later diagnosed with shared delusional disorder. They fed off each other's paranoia, creating a closed loop of fear and belief that spiraled out of control. The Parker Hume case. In 1954, teenage girls Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume of New Zealand developed an intense and isolated friendship, bonding over a shared fantasy world. Their delusions deepened until they conspired to murder Parker's mother, whom they believed was standing in the way of their plans. Psychiatrists later suggested shared psychosis played a role in their violent descent. The Manson family. Though more complex and layered with cult dynamics, Charles Manson's manipulation of his followers presents a broader form of shared psychosis. Isolated from society, Bound by Manson's charisma and apocalyptic teachings, followers adopted his delusions and committed atrocities in the name of a shared belief system. Nazi Germany and the cult of Hitler, one of the most devastating political examples of shared psychosis, unfolded in Nazi Germany. Adolf Hitler's deeply delusional beliefs in racial purity, Aryan supremacy, and a global Jewish conspiracy were not only accepted by millions, but celebrated. Propaganda, isolation, fear, and national trauma created the perfect conditions for mass psychological manipulation. Ordinary citizens, many of whom might never have imagined themselves capable of atrocity, became participants in genocide. This was not simply politics. It was a nation swept into collective madness through charismatic leadership, echo chambers, and engineered fear. Jonestown and the People's Temple, 1978. While Jonestown was rooted in religion, its political undertones were undeniable. Jim Jones, the charismatic leader of the People's Temple, fused spiritual rhetoric with anti-capitalist, socialist ideologies. Isolated in the jungle of Guyana, followers lived under intense psychological pressure, bombarded by sermons and fear-driven messaging. When Jones declared it was time for revolutionary suicide, over 900 people, including children, drank poison at his command. Many did so willingly, under the shared delusion that death was a political and spiritual escape from an impending apocalypse. The QAnon movement, contemporary U.S. QAnon is a modern and alarming example of how shared psychosis can manifest in the digital age. It revolves around a baseless belief that a secret cabal of elites is engaged in child trafficking and that a messianic figure is waging a secret war to expose them. Fueled by anonymous online posts, emotional manipulation, and distrust of mainstream institutions, the movement has attracted thousands. Followers often exhibit cult-like behavior, cutting off dissenting friends and family, becoming increasingly paranoid, and believing in events that never occur. This phenomenon illustrates how delusions can become viral when reinforced by online communities that isolate and radicalize their members. The Satanic Panic, 1980s, 1990s, US, and Canada. During the 1980s and early 1990s, a wave of mass hysteria swept across North America as people came to believe that secret satanic cults were infiltrating daycares, schools, and neighborhoods, performing ritual abuse. These claims, fueled by sensational media reports and coercive interrogation techniques, led to false accusations, wrongful imprisonments, and deep public fear. Though no substantial evidence ever supported these claims, the delusion was socially contagious, spreading from community to community, driven by fear, misinformation, and a hunger for explanation in a time of cultural upheaval. The Targeted Individuals movement. On platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and obscure forums, a growing number of people have come to believe they are victims of government surveillance, electromagnetic attacks, or mind control. Known as targeted individuals, many of these people find each other online and develop elaborate, interconnected delusions. They share evidence, tools for protection, and stories that validate each other's experiences. While some individuals may suffer from genuine psychosis, the online community reinforces these beliefs rather than challenging them, creating a virtual environment of shared delusion. TikTok diagnosis. Culture. On platforms like TikTok, a trend has emerged where users claim self-diagnoses of complex mental health disorders, such as dissociative identity disorder, DID, Tourette's syndrome, and autism spectrum disorder. In some cases, communities form around these identities, and users begin to mimic symptoms seen in popular content creators, leading mental health professionals to raise concerns about social contagion and performative behavior. While not shared psychosis in the clinical sense, this culture demonstrates how suggestibility, community reinforcement, and the need for identity can foster shared distorted beliefs about mental health. Digital amplification of delusion. Social media doesn't just mirror belief, it amplifies it. The algorithms reward content that provokes emotion, especially fear, outrage, or shock. Communities can now form globally around fringe ideas that once would have faded in isolation. In this digital age, the elements that once defined shared psychosis, emotional closeness, isolation from dissent, and a dominant influencer are no longer confined to private relationships. They live in comment sections, group chats, and viral threads. Though often studied in the context of close relationships, shared psychosis can and does ripple outward into broader society. In the age of digital connection, emotional contagion and ideological echo chambers can amplify irrational beliefs on a massive scale. Mass delusions, once localized phenomena, can now span continents in seconds. The proliferation of conspiracy theories such as QAnon, satanic panic, or the widespread denial of verifiable truths may not fit the textbook definition of shared psychosis, but they share psychological fingerprints, a charismatic primary or source of the belief, emotionally vulnerable secondaries, social reinforcement, and a pattern of isolation from dissenting viewpoints. Social media platforms become the new locked rooms. Algorithms, rather than personalities, reinforce the delusions. What begins as curiosity morphs into conviction. Without exposure to countering information, individuals may find themselves fully immersed in alternate realities. Shared psychosis does not begin with madness. It begins with trust. The individuals most susceptible to shared psychosis are often those who are isolated, emotionally dependent, grieving, or suffering from untreated mental illness. When people are vulnerable, their critical thinking can be weakened, especially if they are bound through love, loyalty, or fear to someone with a stronger personality or conviction. Imagine a grieving child turning to a parent who tells them their lost sibling was kidnapped by supernatural forces. The child, overwhelmed by emotion and starved for understanding, begins to believe. Or a partner who, out of love and loyalty, starts to share their spouse's paranoid fears about surveillance and poison in the water. Over time, the line between compassion and reality becomes blurred. When this delusional belief system becomes a shared world, it can be nearly impossible to break the cycle from within. How to avoid becoming a victim of shared psychosis? Cultivate independent thinking. One of the most important tools is critical self-reflection. Ask yourself regularly, is this belief truly mine? Be willing to challenge long-held assumptions, even and especially those passed down by loved ones or admired figures. Stay socially and emotionally diverse. Isolation is a key factor in shared psychosis. Maintain contact with multiple people, especially those outside your immediate circle. Diverse relationships introduce you to differing viewpoints, preventing the collapse of reality into a single, potentially distorted narrative. Seek professional support when needed. If you begin to feel consumed by someone else's belief system, especially if it creates fear, paranoia, or detachment from reality, talk to a mental health professional. Early intervention can make a critical difference. Value dissonance. It's healthy and necessary to be around people who challenge your thinking. Disagreement is not betrayal. In fact, it is often a mirror inviting you to see more clearly. Shared psychosis is not just a psychological anomaly. It is a cautionary tale, a testament to the human hunger for connection, for safety, for answers in the dark. In its most tragic expressions, it reveals how easily we can be led away from ourselves by the gravity of another's delusion. But it also offers us a call to awareness, to remain grounded in the self, to honor empathy without surrendering our reality, to understand that we are not immune to the influence of others, yet with awareness, support, and discernment, we can reclaim our truth when it is threatened. Because at the center of shared psychosis is most often not just madness, but the forgotten voice of someone who simply wanted to belong. This has been Echo Chamber of the Mind, Understanding Shared Psychosis. I am Veni. If you enjoyed this post, please consider donating to me at my support page or becoming a member of my blog community. Thank you for listening.